head of platform engineering at 2 Sigma.
Brian Grant.
It's just light. You have to like.
Okay. Brian Grant, principal engineer, co-lead of Kubernetes engine at Google, and steering committee member of Kubernetes.
Jonathan Bull, director of systems engineering at NStack, and also work in the Open Containers initiative.
And if Sam or Brian want to say something on the phone, feel free.
Yeah, Sam Lambert, head of infrastructure engineering at GitHub.
I'm Brian Cantrell, CTO of Joyent and all alter ego of the cloud.
So, generally the format of this.
Hang on. Should just say that both Ben and Solomon send their apologies.
Yeah,
they both have important matters to attend to, not just bunking off.
Yeah. So, since we don't have any opportunities to do this face to face, we're going to do a quick kind of overview of kind of our accomplishments of 2017, a little bit of discussion on what's on the future for the roadmap for 2018, and then more importantly, just kind of having an open discussion with everyone in the room, since we don't have the opportunity to do this much. So I'll quickly go through some of the achievements. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. We're still a very young organization. So achievements. Favorite achievement, we finally have end user functioning end user community, and Sam was elected to kind of represent the end user community as a TOC slot. Ooh, I could. Thanks, Annie. So it's great to have this functioning. Sam is really there to kind of funnel end user feedback to kind of the rest of the TOC and represent their interests. So I'm kind of happy this is finally functioning. We formalized a TOC contributors program. So, while we have great, super technical folks on the TOC, not everyone is an expert in, every specific technology. And we have a huge, great community. So being able to leverage folks in the community with different domains of expertise and have them provide feedback on project due diligence, and so on is amazing. And honestly, this is also a good list of folks as we do elections next year as potential candidates for actual TOC slots. So we have 39 TOC contributors total. If you go to the TOC repo and GitHub, you could see them listed. Feel free to do a pull request if you're formally interested in participating. These are essentially the folks we reach out every time we have a project proposal that needs due diligence. We actually have 14 projects. So we started this year with 4. We're up to 14. It's been kind of great to kind of see things grow, all usually different areas. It's nice that we kind of have now competing projects, which kind of adheres to our no kingmakers principle. So we have like Rocket Container D, Linker D Envoy. So it's great to see this growth. The other thing here, when we started, CNCF, one of the ideas was, we had to kind of bootstrap everything, right? So we had to eventually write down, like, how do we actually want to do this? The TOC principles is kind of a result of that. So this is basically how the TOC thinks, kind of how the, attitudes are towards which projects we accept, and so on. Alexis, do you want to speak to these things as chair? Kind of go over them really quickly.
Sure. Please read the document. It's very important. It will address questions that you may have been pondering for some time if you haven't read it. Project-centric, this is really the most important thing right now for us. We're all here because of these projects. If you go down to the floor, talk to the end users, the real problems they have to solve, it's the projects that are solving them, and not really sort of any of us as individuals or committees. Secondly, minimal viable governance. This is something that is inherited from thinking about other foundations and what's successful and not successful in other foundations. For example, some of the things that Apache has taught us are that having one-size-fits-all governance for all projects isn't good because they're different sizes and stages of their evolution. At least for the time being, we are very happy that projects can be self-governing. And we have, as you know, a solar system of projects with the Jupyter project, inventing a complex governance because it is a complex project. Prometheus, probably a bit simpler. Looking at it, maybe we'll inherit some things from Kubernetes governance. If another project gets as big as Kubernetes, it probably will replicate your model, I would think. But it's opt-in rather than...
We will figure it out by then.
At least you have some things in place. No kingmakers. So this is about a number of different things. I've noticed that there are foundations where somebody says, this is going to be the project for function X, and then all of the companies that are involved jump on that project and sort of squash it to death, and it stops moving. and then some other project that's really good it gets ignored and also dies. So that's really self-defeating. We also don't believe that we're smart enough with early technology to predict.
Over time,
Yes.
users will choose.
Over time, the market will choose. Yes. And some things will end up in different niches as well. So, Containerd and RKT are a great example of that, I think. Okay, not a standards body. This is a key area of confusion. Standards bodies like IEEE and ISO and IETF exist to extremely slowly and carefully create documents that then get used by everybody as a standard, or hopefully do. Many foundations have gone wrong by trying to create standards before there is a need for one, or by focusing on creating standards when they should be building software that solves real problems. So we wanted to avoid that. There are some specs in the CNCF, like the CNI has a document, and the SPIFFE proposal is another document. Open tracing is one as well. These represent conventions that people have agreed on to essentially have a componentized model of the world. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily the only ways that people will in the future agree to do whatever function they perform. And finally, we want a comprehensive, which actually means we want a comprehensive tool chain. So if someone says, what is the mission in terms of the future? You just add projects indefinitely? No, we want to fulfill key areas of functionality. We don't want to have missing pieces.
And we want to foster growth of projects in areas, especially in areas that may be underdeveloped right now.
Right.
So that's something we're looking forward to in 2018.
Yes. So the storage discussion, which some of you have been involved in, has shown up that there is a shortage of good open source storage projects on the market because storage is a very commercial market preceding cloud native, among other reasons. And if in doubt, and you're saying, how can I help the CNCF today? Find a way to help a project. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. We finalized due diligence guidelines also that basically inputs in terms of what TOC contributors and the actual TOC look for when they go through and review a project. Super thank you to, I don't see Quentin in the audience, but Quentin definitely spearheaded a lot of this work, so thank you there.
Quentin wins the unofficial top TOC contributor award.
So, like we mentioned, we are a kind of a project-first, project-centric organization, right? And so for a long time, I think Dan and I have suffered the one-off email, syndrome where we were getting requests from all of our projects. It was kind of hard to track. So we finally centralized things. So there's just a wonderful, service desk style thing we have in place now. If you go to servicedesk.cncf.io or you just email servicedesk@cncf.io, you're able to basically request funding for your project. We recently funded some outreach interns. We actually funded some rocket documentation. Recently, we're doing third-party security audits for Envoy and Core DNS. And so this has only been live for, the last, I would say, couple of months, and we're finally starting to see use. So I'm expecting this to get more used in the future. So it's a nice centralized way to kind of interface with us. So Dan and I don't drown in emails, and also it holds us accountable because it's kind of a service desk system. So. Actually hired some staff. So the fact that, Dan and I aren't drowning, we now have Ihor, who has been already a participant in various SIGs within the Kubernetes community, like the PM SIG. He's a developer advocate helping me out to make sure we're promoting and supporting our projects. And then technical writing is always a huge pain for all of our projects. So we've hired Zach, who was already participating in SIG docs and have done a ton of great work to improve Kubernetes documentation. He's going to be leading a focus to kind of bring some of these practices to other CNCF projects. So we finally have some people helping out, which is great. One thing that we're trying to do is from moving on starting next year, we're going to be surveying our maintainer community. So these are basically all people who kind of work on our projects, right? Who actually are project leads, committers, have the commit bit, and kind of gauge how are we doing? What can we help with? We tried to experiment and do this a few months ago. The results were, people seem to be okay, happy. There's some complaints, obviously, but, we kind of want to do this on an every 6-month basis. We'll transparently share those results with everyone to kind of help keep us accountable. It's really, it's a bit of a challenge because people hate surveys, but we'll see how we solve that problem. But we had 19 responses.
Sorry in advance for not answering the email.
We're going to come up with a really short survey, which will take 2 minutes to answer, if not 30 seconds.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, a big thing coming up. So we also help finalize kind of the TOC election schedule. So for next year, we'll have 2 seats kind of coming up in the March timeframe. So that'll be a good time potentially if you're interested in participating formally on the TOC and kind of going through that process. So look forward for more information as that happens early next year. Projects, yeah. So we have 14 projects now. We had something I think I counted earlier, like 28 projects that presented to the TOC. We have 6 projects currently that have been formally invited to the proposal phase, which gets them ready for vote. So we have 6 projects in the due diligence phase. So we have Istio, Nats, OPA, Rook, Spiffy, and Vitesse that are essentially open for review. Nats' proposal is coming along. That should be early next year. But if you have any comments or feedback, we would appreciate any help in doing formal technical due diligence on these projects.
And again, the contributor diligence doc actually is very nicely articulates the things that we might be looking for in diligence. So if you want to be helpful, you can read that doc, and there's lots of things. You don't have to do all of them, but even if you have one area that you think you might be able to dig in on in one of these projects, that would be super helpful.
Yep. Don't be scared to be negative either. So. Project review backlog. So there's 2 things here. So I think Alexis and I have kind of tried to put together kind of a list of priorities, a review, and kind of what's been presented to TOC. If there's any projects or things you think we should look at, please send us a note. We kind of want to have an open dialogue with the community here. These sheets are open and available. One thing we need to figure out for early next year is each project has a different kind of maturity level associated with. There's an inception level, which is basically meant for projects that are kind of, very, very early stage, may or may not actually make it. It's something kind of the TOC is willing to take, hey, we think this is a good idea. Like Linkerd, for example, is an inception project. We thought service meshes were, a good kind of pattern. And so Linkerd kind of came in as an inception level. Incubation, a little bit more mature, maybe has more than one company behind it, a little bit more contributors, and then graduated is like, this is kind of blessed, and we think the TOC thinks this is a good, solid, open source project. We need to start formally doing these reviews early next year. I expect Kubernetes, Fluentd, Coordinator, some of these projects to be fully move to the either next level or graduate next year. So if you have any feedback on this process or thoughts, let us know. We're probably going to do it just like we do our project proposals, everything kind of on GitHub via pull requests and comment. So let us know if you have thoughts on how to potentially improve this. Working group updates. We have working groups. I don't think we formally want to do these here. I'd rather just have like an open discussion with everyone. But we have 4 working groups.
Yes, we have 4 working groups.
Please participate.
We had the main event of the week has been the storage working group face-to-face, which for those of you who weren't there was a opportunity for some, turns out, quite controversial issues to be discussed. And I think it's fair to say that matters are not fully settled. And I'm personally happy that we've actually got to the point of people saying what they really think, instead of spending three months in the storage working group, apparently concealing what they think because they weren't sure who'd be upset. So, we in the CNCF, we want to be an open community, and that has 2 parts. One is don't piss people off. There's a code of conduct. Be respectful. Don't be aggressive. But also, bear in mind that to actually work together, we have to contend over issues that will be contentious. We can't have agreement on everything at all times. We have to find areas where we can get consensus and move from there. So I don't know if we want to go through all of the storage stuff right now. I'm personally not in the mood for that.
No, and Ben's not here, but yeah, in terms of the working groups, we talked about the TOC contributors is one way to scale out some of the work that the CNCF does on the technical side. A little bit, the working groups were actually our first initiative along those lines, and they're new this year, and we're still learning their purpose. But definitely, we wanted to bring together people from the CNCF community with expertise in a particular area, and have them help inform the TOC and the whole CNCF community on particular topics, or to work together towards specific concrete goals like the CI working group, I think is a good example of that. So networking was kind of one of our early victories where they helped the CNI project get to a state where a formal proposal could actually be made to the TOC and get that in as an official project. I think that was a really good success case. The serverless working group doesn't have a specific project at the moment that is trying to do something similar with. Instead, they're starting with a white paper to kind of characterize the landscape and come to a common understanding of what certain concepts mean and certain principles that are needed in an open source serverless platform. In terms of projects coming up through that, it serviced the clear need for a common convention for how to express events. For most services that use HTTP or REST APIs, there are kind of common industry conventions that makes infrastructure interoperable, but there's nothing comparable in the event gateway space. So that's an area where CNCF TOC is looking for projects that can fill that role. There are a couple of existing ones. Could be that there needs to be a new one. But that's kind of the function of the working groups, is to help identify these areas, kind of a funnel for projects coming in that fill needs, and also in the diligence phase to contribute their expertise along with the contributors, or some of the contributors could also be in the working groups and vice versa. That's fine, to help bring their expertise to those due diligence discussions.
You know, and the other thing kind of mentioned here is we currently have 4 official working groups. There's definitely some things missing here, like there's a lot of folks, I've been talking to a lot of folks interested in security, right? And potentially don't be afraid of proposing a new working group in CNCF. Have a discussion on the TOC mailing list. So I hope maybe next year we spin up 1 or 2 more working groups in some new areas.
So the purpose of these working groups is to generate useful artifacts that can move understanding, discussion, user understanding forward. But also to help the TOC identify which areas there are strong consensus on, weak consensus, or disagreement, where the TOC might have to say, oh dear, we have a problem here, we're going to need a discussion about what view to take. Because the TOC will be the authority in all of these matters with regard to projects and rulings over definitions.
Cool. We have events. We're at KubeCon. We're doing 3 of them next year. 1 in Europe, in Copenhagen, coming up in May. We're going to be in Shanghai in China for the first time in November and December. We'll be back in the US in Seattle in mid-December. So we'll see how the weather is there, but the weather's pretty terrible right now in Austin. We're going to be canceling the January 2nd TOC meeting, since that's right after kind of New Year's. Not ideal. Our next formal meeting will be January 16th. So if there's any projects or topics you want us to discuss, please let me know. And as you know, meetings are usually first and third, unless there's some kind of first and third Wednesday, unless there's some kind of holiday going on.
Tuesday.
Sorry, it's too many things going on this week. And really, now I think since we have everyone face to face, really the purpose of the meeting is kind of, hey, meet the TOC. Let's have an open discussion. Is there anything that you think that is missing? Are we doing something completely crazy or wrong? What would you like to see improved in next year? We're here to take feedback right now. Or Alexis could do like a monologue. I'm open to it. Yeah. We got Brian and Sam on the phone. Yeah, Brian's good. Brian's really good at monologues.
Hey now.
I vote for that.
Okay, cool.
Don't all ask at once.
Yeah. It's like, how are we doing? Or no, we had a question. Okay.
I was actually just wondering why we don't have beer.
It's before 3 p.m.
I had the same question.
Brian, we can't see you, so you could have beer if you want. No judgment.
You know what? I think I'm going to get one. That's a great idea.
Bring us a couple.
Yeah.
Can we have a show of hands? Is anyone unhappy with some aspect of the CNCF? All right.
Perfect. We got one.
You
Yes.
all the test cases that Ollie Cloud provides us and the Ying Xing.
Sorry, didn't catch that.
Go for it.
Sorry, guys.
I just Ken.
I was muted. Somehow I got unmuted. I don't know how.
Ken, can you wait a second, please?
Yeah.
There's a man in the room who wants to speak.
Yeah, I got it.
Hello. Yeah, so I just got a question. I mean, just for what I do a lot of training around all this stuff. One thing I just noticed in general, and we get asked all the time, is like, you generate artifacts, things like that, not just the working group, but the CNCF in general, or any of the related efforts here. Like, what's everyone else doing to get all the information, to keep up on everything, kind of getting the holistic view? It's one thing to learn one of these tools, right? One of these features, or ways of computing. But what I see a lack of, just by going to lots of companies, thousands of people every year, is a lot of people still just don't know how to build apps on these things, right? And it seems like we're building the tools to fix particular problems, but it doesn't seem like anyone's stepping in to be like, great, here's why we're doing all this. This is how now you build all your stuff on top of it. Is that anything that comes across your guys' radars, or?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. I have, for work-related reasons, recently been like Googling a lot of like, how do we define cloud native again exactly? Like, what exactly does it mean? Because if you Google cloud native definition, you're going to find some hilarious things. And in fact, the charter for the CNCF has a very good definition that does not hit any of
rank one.
It is not a high, Medium has really outstripped us. So that tells you about the random quality of what you're going to see. So I actually think you're absolutely right that perhaps we should put a technical writer against some SEO on just like being a little bit more of not just doing the landscape, which we've done a lot of work on, making the landscape, but also defining the terms of engagement of like, what is cloud native and what do we mean? And here are some, really meaty examples. I think we could do better with that.
Yeah, and there's some specific technologies, emerging technologies like service meshes. We get a lot of questions. Obviously, serverless, and how does that relate to containers, and how does it relate to service meshes? CI/CD, new kinds of automation that are happening, event-driven automation. So, there are lots of emerging things in the cloud native space, and yeah, people are going to need a diagram, I think, to understand how they all fit together.
I mean, one tactical thing the CNCF is doing is we do have kind of a curriculum and training we do for at least one of our projects, Kubernetes. We have a certified Kubernetes administrator exam, CKA, that mostly focuses on the operator aspects. But this week, as part of the conference, we're getting a bunch of people together to build something called CKAD, which focuses on the application developer's perspective in terms of yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll just add one more piece, which is this is actually some feedback I've been hearing from multiple different sources. And so I'd like to commit that CNCF staff is aiming to redo our website in the next 2 months. So hopefully faster, but by February, I would hope that we would have a lot more content to just much more taxonomy than sales necessarily, but even to the degree of just saying, oh, 2 of our projects actually compete as container runtimes. You probably only pick one, probably only want Linkerd or Envoy, and then the scenarios where you might use each one. And then maybe later we can get into evangelism and all the other stuff. But I think there's just a dearth of content right now that we could help fill out.
So I was actually part of the CCAD test development this last weekend. And I guess on this topic, we were sort of struggling with what should a developer have to know to get the certification. Granted, it's aimed at Kubernetes, not cloud native in general, but we've sort of come down with a number of topics. But if someone is interested in this, I think they're still meeting on Saturday and Sunday. It's got to fit into a couple of hours of test, but test should drive then people going and figuring out what it is that the test is going to ask them, et cetera. So if people have ideas about what a developer should know in order to do cloud native, I think the meeting is still open this Saturday and Sunday to discuss.
I think Yaron was first, and then we'll.
Yeah, so along the lines of what was discussed, I think there's no real clarity on what cloud native is. Sometimes we're favoring the sort of big tent approach. We still have DB2 and Oracle on those sort of charts. We need to provide patterns for developers in the website. This is cloud native. There are design patterns. This is how you would design a cloud native application. So I think we're in favoring of putting more projects, more vendors, big tent approach instead of specializing and educating the developers. This is cloud native. This is how you would build it.
Or we are somewhat opinionated if you read the charter.
Yeah.
For example, focus on container oriented deployment as opposed to say VM oriented deployment.
If you read some of my blogs, I think containers is not a way to define cloud native. I think
I agree.
elasticity and sometimes people say, we support containers, we're already cloud native.
Yeah, I agree. Containers are neither necessary nor sufficient. But I like that you said patterns and not pattern, because a lot of these projects provide tools that can be used in flexible ways to implement multiple different patterns. And Kubernetes in particular is deliberately unopinionated about how to deploy applications on top of it. If you walk around the showcase, you'll see DataWire and others developing new innovative ways of simplifying deployment of certain types of applications. They're not fully general purpose. For example, they may not work for stateful applications or data processing applications or CI/CD platforms running on top or storage systems running on top. But there are going to be a number of common patterns, and those we should definitely try to help people understand.
Maybe we can work with like Netflix, eBay, others, say, help us document your patterns and put it as sort of examples.
Okay.
Hey, so I'm kind of new to the community, so I kind of do apologize in advance if I'm asking something that's trivial.
Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Annie Lai.
Hi.
Hi. I'm just wondering, for every release, do we have anything like a release note that shows the highlights of each release? And also, for each project, is there any place that we actually document, not really roadmap, but what are people working on, what people should expect coming down the pike, and then what are the areas that you are looking for more developers to contribute? I think this would be really helpful for newcomers.
I think the CII infrastructure badge, one of the things it requires is to have release notes with releases. There are certain standards there, and that's part of our graduation criteria for all kinds of projects. So we don't have a standard place where release notes can be found across all the projects, but that is something we try to. You're going to say something, Chris?
No, keep going.
Okay. That is a thing that we expect of the projects, and I'm sure the CNCF staff would help projects who aren't familiar with those kind of processes as they try to work towards those milestones. Helping new contributors find where they contribute, I think, is a great idea, both at the CNCF level to direct people to projects that are in need of people, and for each individual project. That's definitely something we're working on in Kubernetes to make it clear as the project grows, where are the areas most in need of contributors and what kind of roles do we need contributors to fill. In the running of the Kubernetes releases themselves, one thing we did is we identified several specific roles, and we're documenting what the responsibilities of those roles are. And we found that to be easier for people to understand the areas of need, and the level of commitment and responsibilities and expertise, as compared to just thousands of GitHub issues and 90 different repositories. So I think we're going to expand that kind of model across more areas of the project. Yeah.
We're still a young organization, and officially not any a project hasn't graduated yet. So we've been steering projects into saying like it's good to have like a roadmap, and it's good to like list your governance and so on, your adopters and so on. So like next year we should probably make some strides in that. But our current philosophy in CNCF, each project is kind of free to define its own governance and how it operates. It's kind of when we started this thing, it was like all these, from my time and experience in open source, like each open source project is like unhappy in its own way, and like you trying to like dictate one way of doing things, I think is not productive, right? And so it makes it harder sometimes to track what's going on and how to interface with things, but that's kind of the choice we made, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, but especially in newer projects, you're looking for guidance about how to do things, I'm sure. So I'm really, but even as a mature project, I'm looking forward to exercising the service desk. We're going to try that out shortly.
Lovely, lovely. Anyone else? Alex, sure.
Hi, my name's Alex Kirkup. One of the things I think would be really useful is if we get more end user involvement in the CNCF, because when I go and talk to different organizations about adopting some of these technologies, we often see quite huge gaps between what we think cloud native should be versus where they are at the moment. And I think if the gap is so big that we're expecting an organization or a development group to kind of make this huge leap in one go, it can seem really daunting, and it sort of holds people back. And if we can think of ways of allowing organizations to kind of step incrementally towards, you know, an aspirational goal or an end user target, that would really, really useful. And if we can get end user feedback into how we get there, and kind of build that into project criteria and the kind of projects that we're looking for, that would be incredibly useful to the adoption of CNCF.
Sam, are you still on?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to this a little bit. I mean, we do have a like formal end user board / community in CNCF that I think for the last 12 months, Dan and I have been working really hard to kind of add members into that and get going. I think a lot of people may not realize the end user community actually meets on a monthly basis amongst themselves and has presentations sharing practices amongst each other, and also has CNCF projects presenting to them and kind of sharing amongst them, essentially away from all the different vendors. So they kind of have this safe space, for lack of a better word, to kind of share practices and so on. It is it's on my plate next year personally to find a way to I had a meeting earlier this week with someone from Morgan Stanley. It's like we would love to funnel some requirements back to some of the projects. How do we do this? And maybe coming up with some kind of process, whether it's a GitHub repo or something where our end user community could actually funnel some suggestions back to the projects is something I want to do. I don't know, but I haven't had a formal kind of discussion with the TOC to see what they think necessarily about this yet.
I think we would. I was going to say, I think we would also love to see more projects that are coming out of end users. So, Envoy is a great example of a project that I think we're all extremely happy to have in CNCF. And it is a nice example of something that was really built for a company that had a need that they met internally with this software. And, they open sourced it, and it became very, very widely adopted because actually it met the needs of a lot of companies similar to Lyft. And so, I am hoping in the next year that we continue to see not just projects that are kind of generated by the void of necessary open source in an area by people who may ultimately want to be vendors or, are sort of cloud providers themselves, but also things actually coming from the end user community. So, anyone listening to this, if you guys have projects that you think are useful, that have been really useful for your team in becoming more cloud native, please think about open sourcing them and think about bringing them to us.
And if you have ideas, Alex, please let us know. So it's one of my goals next year to figure out how to at least funnel some of these requirements back in and make it easier. So, kind of in the interest of time, so, we've kind of, the way we structured this is we would have an hour or so of public meeting, and then you have a private meeting, but it's up to you actually when you want to start that, or if people have more questions, we could gladly ask them. So we got a question in the back, but let me know how you want to do this.
Hi, John Bellameric from Core DNS and Infoblox. In the talk, I know you came up with a reference architecture, a very high level reference architecture for a stack. And, I was wondering if there's any, and you also have the landscape, right? And all of those things focus on infrastructure. I'm wondering two things. One is is there an effort or a desire to refine that reference architecture to be something not completely prescriptive, but a little bit more prescriptive on what the stack looks like? I mean, we have a sort of de facto with Kubernetes, but there's the different components that plug into that. And then the second question is, there's not really been a focus on what the application architectures look like. I think this is what the gentleman in the back was talking about. It's not just like a certified Kubernetes application developer, but what is the actual application built that utilizes all these services and utilizes all the things the platform provides look like? And do you see that as something that the CNCF should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, if the CNCF were a company doing software, we would look really odd. So we apparently have no marketing department. We do events, but our website is kind of weird. And you know, when it comes to what are the customers actually doing, it turns out they're building apps, but how do they do that? And our stories need to be fleshed out here quite clearly. And there's also, it's not an elephant in the room, but there's another foundation that looks after apps, part of Linux Foundation, called the Cloud Foundry Foundation. So we need to figure out, you know, how do we work with sister foundation there as well. So there's lots to do in the future. With regard to your particular question about reference architecture, I wonder if Ken is on the line, because he owned the first version.
And can I mute on purpose?
Hi, Ken.
Yeah, hi. I am muted on purpose this time. What was the question, Alexis?
What's the future of reference architectures? Do you want to do another one? Update it or anything like that?
A more detailed one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a need to do a more detailed one, and kind of to the point that was made earlier, have some users involved in that, as well as, you know, kind of the cloud patterns, the cloud native development patterns we talked about, have it driven from sort of the application developer's view down. I think is sort of the next step we talked about doing, and something I'd definitely be interested in kicking off early next year if there's interest in getting to that level.
I think your idea of doing it with the end user group is excellent.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So actually, Ken had proposed this earlier, but he didn't get takers to help him out with it. So this is another area where all of you could help out if someone has an interest in working on this type of thing. Volunteer on the TOC mailing list.
Each volunteer will have their name on a brick in the architecture.
We'll call it brick as a service.
Yeah. No, it's a bureaucracy. We have to find people to do things. Please help.
You have to say I had success with that, by the way, within Kubernetes, getting a contributor to just like start, okay, here's a diagram. This is what I think you meant. Is that right? And then, you know, we can iterate on that. That even just providing that that help in diagramming things, adding bullets to things and making things super concrete, so people would say, oh no, actually that's not what I meant, would be super helpful for driving things forward.
Test. Hello. Hi. I'm Chase Pettit, Wikimedia Foundation. The contributors stuff is so new. I've read through most of the stuff on GitHub, and the one thing that I was kind of missing was timelines. How long is something going to be in one phase? How long do you have to go through and review material and submit questions before it's up for a vote?
Purposely vague right now, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
also the answer is kind of, it depends.
Yeah.
Like right now, we're not going to have any votes on any projects until January at least.
Yeah.
So right now there's a little bit of time. Also with some specific projects, there's some issues to sort out.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit less urgency there. We should definitely make it clear for individual proposals what the expected timeline is. Obviously, for some, the timeline is, we're going to want it to be shorter instead, you know, like a small number of weeks. So we'll try to specify that on a proposal by proposal basis for now.
Yeah. Yeah, because if I see that there's 2 weeks until a vote, maybe I don't have time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a bit of, am I going to be able to get it done kind of thing.
Yeah, we've tended to go quite slowly on those votes. And if you feel that we've gone too fast, please shout next time.
I think I just don't have any idea.
Okay.
Cool.
So we've often said things like something can't be proposed and voted on in the same meeting, and that could be extended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another thing relating to that concerns me is that we don't have exit strategies for all of our working groups. So with definition of success, and I hope that, you know, I don't want them to just exist indefinitely, just kind of doing chumbling away, obviously.
Yeah, it seems like there would be a cutoff for submitted feedback and then a period of review, and then everyone would kind of know when that was going to come to a close.
Anyone else?
One last question.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool. Enjoy the rest of the conference.